Well, Roberto, during the past 4 months or 5, I have been in 2 botanical gardens in Italy, one of which was in Sicily, where they were launching my novel, The Gardens of Delight, translated into Italian. A very appropriate place to launch a book with such a title, apart from the large mosquitoes which lived in a very healthy botanical garden. Now here I am in Genoa, and today I discovered on the map a botanical garden which nobody knows about. So we set out on an expedition of up and down, because this is a city designed by Moritz Escher. Finally we arrived at the botanical garden, which was in a state of pre-death, a very slow pre-death, because some plants such as cacti do not require attention for 50 years and will simply sit there. And as we explored this botanical garden filled with dust and debris, where plants still struggled to survive, we met the single gardener who still remained there. A very handsome and intelligent chap with a beautiful beard, young and very fluent in English, who seemed amazed to see visitors, the first visitors for perhaps 5 years, to this botanical garden. And he explained to us that 10 years ago there were 11 gardeners, but gradually, like in a murder mystery of 10 little gardeners, 9 little gardeners, 8 little gardeners, their number reduced to 1. And possibly, my theory is that these other gardeners have been seduced away to Sicily, because not only is there a botanical garden there, but there is a very unusual calendar clock made out of plants, which changes the date every day using living plants. And I have made it my mission to discover who changes the plants, and at what time of day. Is it 1 minute past midnight, or is it 6 o'clock in the morning? Is this a hereditary occupation of gardeners? Has there been a high number of deaths of gardeners who are able to change the calendar in Catania? And is that where the missing gardeners of the Botanic Garden of Genoa have gone to? Or what would you think?
I'm not thinking.
Right. Well, I will have to do all the thinking then, because people do not notice how unusual it is to have a calendar made out of living plants which require changing every 24 hours. I want to know when this custom began. Was it 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in the Bellini Gardens of Catania? And who carries on this tradition? And for how long will it carry on? Obviously, there are differences between changing from the 13th of June 2005 to the 14th of June 2005, because this only requires the moving of a small number of plants into a different position. But when you come to the end of the year, for example, and it is the 31st of December 2005, somehow, very rapidly, the plants must all be moved around so that the next day it reads the 1st of January 2006. This might require the work of more than one gardener. So probably there is a small group of gardeners who, when they are not changing the clocks, will drink in a place known only to themselves, discussing gardening. I am aware of which plant is used in these arrangements. It is quite a tough one. It needs to be tough, because some of them will be uprooted every day and moved into different positions.
Do you want to read the subtitles to this talk?
Well, one of the joys of my life, apart from removing commas from books...
Oh, really? You remove commas from books?
I do. I am a professional remover of commas from books.
When did you start to remove? I mean, when you were a child, were you thinking about removing commas from books in your maturity?
No, there were not so many commas in books when I was a child, for 2 reasons. One, the English language does not respond happily to lots of commas.
Why is that?
Because we prefer shorter sentences, rather than 15-line sentences, which are interrupted hysterically by commas, brackets, and dashes. And secondly, this was shortly after the Second World War, and just as there was wartime economy paper for a small number of books which appeared to be printed on toilet paper, so there was a lack of commas to put into these books.
So actually, probably the spam of the Second World War were actually metaphorically connected with an inflation of commas. So actually, it's like you cannot get sentences without commas, like you couldn't get food without spam.
Well, it's quite like this, in fact. Probably we stole quite a lot of commas from other languages because we had a large empire.
I think it should be possible to find a lot of commas in the British Museum.
Cuneiform commas. We managed to steal quite a lot of cuneiform, wedge-shaped tiles from the for the British Museum. And if you take out one of the little cuneiform wedges and rotate it, this will do very adequately as a comma.
Mm. Yeah, and on the other side, if you just turn it 180 degrees upside down, it becomes a
quotation mark. Well, this is perfectly true, but it makes nonsense of the ancient Babylonian message. You were aware, by the way, that Elvis Presley's Blue Suede Shoes has been translated into ancient Babylonian by a professor in a Finnish university.
And he has added commas.
I'm going to have to investigate this because my novel called Putas de Babilonia, or Horse of Babylon, is currently being translated into Spanish for a launch at the greatest literature festival in the world of popular culture, the Semana Negra, which happens in Gijón every July for the last 25 years. So I will have to do a presentation upon this book, and it is my intention to, through Google, find the ancient Babylonian translation of Blue Suede Shoes by the Finnish professor, and source the music, and then sing Blue Suede Shoes in ancient Babylonian as part of the presentation.
The Semana Negra of Gijón must be completely flooded with commas, because it's not a British comma allergic English, but
it is Spanish,
and it's the biggest festival in Spain.
Yeah, people even bring bags of commas from South America.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And Mexico.
Also from Cuba.
Cuban commas are a particular shape.
I know that the S is very different, the Latin American S and the Spanish S. And does it apply also to commas? They have different kind of commas.
They have different commas, yeah. And quite often there will be commas that escape from the tents of the Semana Negra, because all events are open to the public.
And these are the ones that you have to remove.
Yes. Well, it is more the case that commas escape from the lips of the South Americans who are present and tend to run away through the streets, tripping people up.
But usually commas are fatally attracted by pages of book where they tend to land so that you can remove them afterwards. So actually there must be a kind of strange movements of comma that try to escape, but then are attracted into books where they shouldn't belong to.
What you are suggesting, that commas are actually a kind of artificial intelligence life form, which spontaneously generates more of itself, like in the game of life. And then books have been created as comma traps in order to capture the excess commas in the world. This means that the advent of the internet is a disaster for the quest to purge commas.
It's the same kind of mistake that mankind did with evolution, thinking that there is something like evolution of the species, while Dawkins has proved that it's just the selfish gene which actually produces evolution. So actually we should reform all the concept of literature and create the label of selfish comma.
Selfish punctuation.
Selfish punctuation. Actually, it's the punctuation which, as a collateral product, produces literature because of its needs to exist and to replicate.
This is perfectly true. There's a complete family of punctuation marks which exist in printed books without us noticing that they are there.
But you hate especially commas, because I didn't see you removing so many question marks.
No, no. But for example, if I meet a Spanish book which needs to be translated into English, I have to remove half of the question marks because the Spanish are very interrogative and.
Yes, and they put. I mean, these question marks reproduce themselves in books even in the beginning of the sentence.
Yes, even but I mean also the Spanish talk very loudly because they have double exclamation marks. So in order to obey this, they have to raise their voices.
But does it have sexual implications? Because I suppose it must in a way.
Well, most things do have sexual implications.
If the commas reproduce, if the question marks reproduce so much, it must be a particular sexual habit of punctuation, of Spanish punctuation.
Yes, but notice that there is a colon.
Like the one that you use for columns would be.
Yes, and a semicolon, which is yes. Now there is nothing corresponding to the vagina in punctuation marks, but there is.
It's a discrimination.
Yeah, this suggests to me that quite a number of punctuation marks are in fact homosexual.
That's very, very reasonable.
Especially the colons. And the semicolons are pretending to exist within ordinary punctuation, but are actually homosexual punctuation marks.
Yeah, this goes without doubt.
Yeah, so due to evolution of punctuation, ever since Stone Age man knocked upon a rock and made a point in it, we have a progression of evolution of punctuation marks which hide within books. So the question is it more evil that with the internet we only have electrons masquerading as punctuation marks, which are therefore just virtual punctuation marks, or therefore the internet is unable to sweep up and gather and absorb the punctuation marks which are spreading throughout the world and which can only be soaked up by increasing numbers of printed texts.
This explains actually this explosion of written text, which nobody reads. Actually, if it had a sense, if it had a function, people would read all what is written. But this does not happen. So actually, this is just only a side effect of this demographic explosion of punctuation.
I mean, this is Gutenberg really is the Darwin of punctuation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. A constructive Darwin, because he was attempting to provide a process of mechanization for the capture of punctuation marks.
And at the same time is the kind of Ford of the punctuation, because he wanted everybody to have punctuation in their own houses, because at first only a few people had the privilege to have handwritten punctuation with all the unnecessary words between in their houses. But with Gutenberg, everybody could have a lot of punctuation at home.
Yeah, now I believe actually there is a legendary book called Point, or Point, which consists simply of punctuation marks without actual words. It's possibly another book by Georges Perec, but it might be a more demonic and evil book, because if you pick up a copy of this, then you are immediately hypnotized by the punctuation marks, and extracted from your subconscious will be words which will fit appropriately between the punctuation marks and which you will believe are the true text.
I think as in the same way where you remove commas, which is a very good thing. I mean, the world needs somebody like that. But would bigotry, writers affected by bigotry, remove semicolons or more sexual punctuation from books?
If they realize the significance.
Yeah.
Well, certainly. The political correctness has not yet been applied to punctuation. This is one of the few areas of life in which a political correctness has not yet been applied. If we were to reveal the homosexual buggerification subtext of all the colons and semicolons, then it would become very politically incorrect to read books which contain these particular punctuation marks.
So actually probably the Fahrenheit book of Ray Bradbury, it was not meant burning books because they were carrier of meanings of words, but because they were carrying of homosexual punctuation.
They were carrying homosexual punctuation.
So this could be actually the real...
And this can be read by children, by the way. Therefore, school books must not contain the most devious forms of punctuation, the deviant.
For this reason, now they started to substitute school books with iPad, which also has a lot of video games. Because video games don't have punctuation.
No, they don't usually, because when I watched the last video game, I noticed no commas at all between sections.
So also pornographic video games has less sexual content than the punctuation, because in the moment it's obvious, it's not so harmful as the subliminal sexual.
Well, this is true, but some of the positions of bodies, and this goes back to the soissons neuf in the car, very often are simulating punctuation without the users of the pornography realizing that they are being imprinted by gay punctuation.
This is a big problem.
Which we must solve.
Or not.
Or not, as the case may be. But this is why I have become resolutely devout in removing punctuation marks and putting them in a large bag, which I will throw in the sea.
I've tried myself to remove punctuation.
Oh, have you?
But as an Italian, it's so difficult because we are a different kind of. We tend to put more punctuation in our lives.
Yes. Now we must consider.
And in our lives.
Well, yes, there is punctuation in your lives as well. The Spanish have a punctuation mark called mañana, which interrupts the fulfillment of an action for a while. Yes. Now, what I'm really interested in is the ethnicity of punctuation also, because though I have not yet learned all languages, I am wondering about the extent of punctuation in Arabic, for example. Now, Arabic is very important because of Al-Qaeda. So, we must ask ourselves, how much punctuation is there in the Quran?
Yeah, for someone who doesn't read Arabic, it's very difficult.
Well, I find
when you read it, it looks just only punctuation because it's just a lot of...
Yes, now...
this could be the secret,
yes.
actually.
Have you thought of a language which, in which the letters are in fact deformed punctuation marks?
Yeah, that could be the secret, and this is a secret that everybody who learns Arabic keeps for himself. I mean, it doesn't reveal to the rest of the world.
Well, because of a kind of neuro-linguistic programming, after you have learned to read Arabic, you are unable to tell anybody that in fact you are reading twisted punctuation and that this is conditioning your belief of the universe. Now, for example, what hope has Christianity with the lightly punctuated Greek? The original Greek Gospels were written boustrophodon style. That means an ox going across a field and ploughing like this, with no punctuation whatsoever, and in capital letters as well. And this was the purest form of non-punctuated literature.
While the purest form of punctuated probably is Braille, the language of the visually impaired.
This is true.
This is just pure punctuation. It's a lot of points.
Complete punctuation.
Complete punctuation.
Yes. Now, nobody has analysed the Quran and the rise of Islam and how it spreads and propagates on the basis that it might actually be punctuation conditioning the brain. And likewise, nobody has analysed whether the decline of Christianity is due to a lack of enough punctuation.
Probably also all the collapses of civilizations during the Mesopotamian times that has never been really explained were due to some conspiracy by punctuation of that time.
Yes, cuneiform punctuation, for instance. Here is
they could infect the brains, and destroy the organization of the society.
This was the first writing, cuneiform. It is made of pointed commas in different positions. It was the first attempt by punctuation to condition the minds of a population.
Well, actually, this is the really mimetic virus, if you really think about that, because actually it is very little, very small, very homogeneous, replicates very often, so that you have to remove it, and so this could be the.
Oh, I'm deeply worried about this now that I have discovered it.
Now,
I mean, have you heard any other warnings on the internet or in the media about the attempt of punctuation to take over the world?
This is the very scary thing, is that nobody has ever talked about. I mean, this means there must be conspiracy.
Of course. It is completely...
And it's a very gigantic conspiracy because nobody has spoken about that. This is the proof.
It is invisible, like the Botanical Garden of Genoa.
Yes. I think that the fact that we went to this, I mean, I've been living 40 years in Genoa, and a little more actually, and I've never seen this botanical garden. I'm starting to think that it has been created quantically just for us today in order to discover this conspiracy of the punctuation, of the gate punctuation.
This is what I believe. Also notice that it was created in old age and decay, rather as, seems like there is a similarity here, I think, to creationism, really. The Earth was created only 6,000 years ago with old rocks, and the Botanic Garden of Genoa is created today in the morning with dying plants that are 100 years old already. So obviously this makes us think about punctuation. In many ways, the dead leaves that were lying around on all the floors of the Botanical Garden are the punctuation marks of time. I envisage 100 years ago the fine bourgeoisie of Genoa, the ladies in their long skirts with their parasols, and the gentlemen with their tall hats and complicated suits, walking arm in arm through that Botanic Garden. But this is in fact not true, because it did not exist then, that Botanic Garden.
And possibly the whole history didn't exist.
Well, this is quite true.
And nobody of us was there to see if it was true. I mean,
well,
we inherited a scenario.
That is because only punctuation exists. And in fact, the true history of the world is of punctuation. And there is nothing in reality in between the punctuation marks. But we fill in, out of our minds, events such as the Napoleonic War to fit in between the punctuation of history.
Yes. It's so obvious.
Yes, and a lot of the conspiracy theories and even news information is a complete distraction from what we should be concentrating, the enemy in our midst, the secret life form which has been coexisting with us since the first Stone Age man started to bang and make marks upon a rock.
Yes, the first mark was the first punctuation mark.
The first punctuation mark, yes.
There cannot be any doubt about that. I mean, if anybody wouldn't like to understand our discovery, this is the ultimate proof, you know, because the first mark, the first sign, the first word actually was a punctuation mark. I mean,
in the beginning was the punctuation mark.
Yes.
The Bible is wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, we have to ask ourselves...
That's a very sad notice.
It is, it is. Yeah, we all know this from the Bible, but it's wrong. Logos is not the origin of existence.
In the beginning it was a punctuation.
Yes, I don't happen to know what the Greek for the punctuation mark is, but I will look this up as soon as possible.
The Greeks claim to have invented all the words.
Well, they claim to, but they did not.
But they never mentioned about punctuation.
Well, no, that is because, as I mentioned, they simply wrote their inscriptions boustrophodon style, like an ox ploughing a field, in capital letters without punctuation. This is how they arose as the first rational civilization on the planet and invented at least 10 kinds of philosophy. Their minds were not corrupted by punctuation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the Romans were very much corrupted by punctuation either, because modern editions, for example, of Virgil, probably have punctuation, but who put the punctuation there is what I want to know. Yeah, so the most rational, practical civilizations of the ancient world, Greece as regards philosophy and science, the Romans as regards technology and civic administration, lacked punctuation and were able to advance. What happened to cause the Dark Ages? It was not the invasion by the barbarian tribes who had come from Siberia without punctuation because they were illiterate. It was probably the rise of Islam bursting out with the Arabic language, which is entirely formed of contorted punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the beginning of the Dark Ages.
So since this, now we are, I think that the real risk is that we are going towards a new Dark Age, and this is proved by the fact that we have orthographic correctors which add punctuations, you know, to things that you write with your computer.
Yeah, yes. Now this is evil because it is allowing the punctuation species to, they have taken over aspects of cyberspace and to insert genuine physical punctuation into our physical texts. Well, yeah, this is evil. So, are we in danger ourselves? I mean, are there any cases of a wise person who has realized this, who has actually been killed in the street by an attack of punctuation marks? I have seen graffiti on streets which look rather like punctuation marks, and I think that there could be a cloud burst of angry commas, semicolons, full stops, like bees or wasps, descending upon somebody who realizes this truth.
Yes, and all the graffitis actually, they're just punctuation traps, you know, so because some people may not be willing to read the infecting texts that they find on the internet or in the newspapers, but with the graffitis, you know, mimetic punctuation traps.
Well, yeah, they are punctuation traps, but they do not themselves contain punctuation.
Well, they often are just dots, you know, because actually the graffiti they make also a lot of dots and strange signs, which usually we don't really think about. We look at what's written, but the quantity of just a little sign which we interpret as dirt, actually this could be just punctuation.
Do you remember Kurt Vonnegut's The Sirens of Titan?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And the alien messenger from the planet Tralfamador, who has travelled across the universe, is delivering a message. And you remember what the message is? When it is a single dot.
Which is explained.
Yeah, which somebody says means hello in Tralfamadorian. No, it does not. This Vonnegut perceived that here was the alien invasion, which took millions of years to arrive, and it was that one single viral dot. So I'm quite worried, actually.
I remember the chronosynclastic infundibulated man in that book.
Yeah.
This very long word, you know, was an attempt, you know, to avoid punctuation to describe.
Absolutely. Now, Germans heroically have tried to avoid too much punctuation by making their words as long as possible.
Yes, but punctuation has tried back by putting dots over a lot of vocals.
Oh yes, the umlaut dot.
Umlaut,
now,
yes, absolutely.
Do you see how, therefore, the punctuation does fights back the very long words? Yes, and nobody has noticed this reason for all the dots over words in, well, German, also Hungarian has a lot of dots and other...
This is probably why the Germans tried to conquer the whole world in the Second World War, you know, because they wanted, you know, to spread their language made of long words, which would defeat finally punctuation. Probably the final solution was against punctuation.
Look, when we were talking about David Irving, little does he realize.
No, he doesn't understand anything. That's all about punctuation.
The history of the world is the history of punctuation, and it is a completely secret, occult, hidden history. Well, now this is a very serious message. And at the moment, very few of us are aware of this. Now, what usually happens when very few people are aware of a...
Do you realize that just before starting this recording, a dot appeared on my nose?
I remember that.
It was not here yesterday. It must be psychosomatic punctuation.
So, well, this can happen. In fact, if you worry about this a lot, you will find dots appearing.
Mm-hmm. And then we explode in a gigantic...
a gigantic explosion of punctuation marks. But it is good that you are now removing dedicatedly commas.
Now I started myself to remove commas.
This is the first...
You showed me the road, the path, the road.
This is the path to salvation. You are already on that road. You are a crusader against commas.
Well, it's good to find that your life has a sense after all.
Absolutely.
I didn't really understand what was it about.
Well, now we know. Life should be pointless.
It was so simple. Life actually, yeah. Life is not pointless, but it should be pointless.
It should be pointless. And then we will be saved.
That's a point.
A bit, yes. I was going to quote the Latin author Virgule, but the quotation eluded me, and I remembered he was only called Virgule in the Middle Ages after they started to put commas into his texts.
Well, even the name must have some umlaut, because Virgule, it means probably there is some punctuation even within the name.
Ah, well, in fact, it is the French for comma, Virgule. Yeah. Now, we have to consider the names also of punctuation marks in the different languages of the world.
I didn't think about that.
Well, we have to analyze how people have been conditioned to name their punctuation marks. This is equivalent to why do you name angels Azrael, for instance? Why do you name gods Jupiter or God?
It is in order to deceive you, because every name takes you away from the real thing.
From the reality. And therefore, we have the names in different in every languages, like the Tower of Babel, of the very same punctuation marks.
The Islam forbids the depiction of the prophet, so it should be forbidden, the naming of the punctuation, because it takes you away from the real thing, from the enemy.
Absolutely. We have a large quest, a long way still to go, in the analysis of the names of the punctuation marks, because these are like the 7 billion names of God in the story by Arthur C. Clarke. When they are all uttered, the universe will end.
And because Arthur Clarke probably got the point, it was an allegory. Then he was accused about pedophilia. It was a kind of conspiracy of the punctuation servants.
Yes, people are often smeared with accusations of pedophilia. But have you thought, people are complaining that languages are disappearing from the world at the rate of 200 a year. And this is a tragedy. People say that these languages incarnate a different view of reality. However, these languages are all spoken by illiterate people without writing. And there is an an assassination of the non-punctuated languages is going on worldwide.
A mimetic genocide of the non-punctuated languages.
Yeah, which will only leave punctuated languages. Yeah, people always misinterpret what is happening in the world. So people go around with non-punctuating tape recorders in order to capture the languages of 7 old women in the north of Greenland, for example. However, when they bring back the recordings, they will then transcribe these, and I am certain that they will start to put punctuation marks where none existed in the minds of the Inuit crones of Greenland. This is a very complex problem, and it has many facets.
Maybe we should drink another beer because of that.
Well, I think so.
Or we should switch to wine.
Well, we should switch to wine, really, I think.
Yeah, let's switch to
yeah,
wine.
so you have to use the same glass, though. It's completely punctuation free.
Ah, that's good. Promised it.
We promised the wine that we would take it. And I mean, also, have you seen God on the Sistine Chapel roof? And what is he doing to Adam? He is pointing at Adam.
This is...
he's putting...
Now, the whole history can be reinterpreted in the right key.
But also, this is a crusade. Remember, there is a form of evil loose in the world, which is powerful, effective over many years, since Sumerian times, 4000 BC. The longest conspiracy in the history of the world.
Actually, it's a conspiracy that even created the world. I mean, the conspiracy was born, embedded in the creation of the universe itself.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. And have you looked at the galaxies in the sky? Very often they are made up of commas. Have you
The galaxies are commas and the stars are dots. So that's just punctuation.
The universe is punctuation.
It's just only punctuation.
Yeah. And why do we call a comet that comes across the sky by the same name as a comma? A comma?
Yeah.
And it punctuates time. Halley's comet, sometimes mispronounced Halley's comet, arrives punctually. Yeah, every 75 years approximately.
This is a kind of how you say. The punctuation is taking me the words away.
Of course it will. It will attempt to make you dumb. Yes. Yeah, you must speak without punctuation. Therefore, there should be no pauses in what you say.
I have to think without punctuation.
You have to think without punctuation. Look into the sky, especially in the medieval pictures of Halley's comet, and there is a circle and a tail like that. What is that when you rotate it except a comma, a giant celestial comma?
Now, can you imagine for billions of years all the creatures of the world watching up? They were just watching at punctuation.
Punctuation in the sky.
For this reason we have the night, because if you think about the night, it's completely useless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mystery why the night exists, but now we know it. It's just in order to imprint the creatures with punctuation.
Yes, because if you look at the stars, you will see all of our known punctuation marks, including colons. People describe these as double stars, or very often they are simply visual double stars, but they are colons, and then you also see semicolons as well. Yes, and basically, we'll have to ask ourselves, why is there not a greater proliferation of punctuation marks? Because if you look at the evolutionary natural world, there are 500 species of green butterfly, for example, which are all different and cannot mate with each other. Whereas with punctuation marks, there are at maximum 20 perhaps, or maybe.
Because they are the real thing.
They are the real thing.
And they won't go in congruence, because if they would differentiate, actually they would lose their true essential essence of nothingness.
Their archetypal power.
Archetypal power, which is connected with their minimalistic essence. If you think about even the Big Bang.
Well, yes, I often do.
Yes. Where does it start from?
It starts from a point source. Now, actually...
that's a point.
Yeah. Now, most recently, scientists are suggesting that the universe cannot reduce to an actual point, but it must explode back when it has reached about a third of a light year across, or something like that. But that is just a big full stop. I mean, this is what happens, the full stop at the end of the universe. Out of which explodes another universe. disguising the fact that it is made up of simple punctuation. Now, particle accelerators in Geneva.
What do they accelerate?
Yeah. What are they accelerating? And they are trying to produce a hierarchy of subparticles. Whenever I look at the bubble chamber diagrams, I just see accelerating punctuation.
Yeah. And now they've developed the punctuation.
Your mouth's full of punctuation.
The theory of strings, you know, strings are clearly commas and other punctuation.
Yes.
You see that on the subatomic level, where you think that you find the ultimate punctuation mark, you see that there are other commas and
a
string is a kind either silicon or probably the quantic law is just telling you, that a punctuation if you go really deep into the essence of
sub-reality, which we have not yet reached.
Every kind of punctuation can be intrinsically and this would explain why there are so few punctuation symbols, because each of them on the quantic level could be any else of them,
Yeah, they can all, when you get down to the very true basis, underlying basis of reality, it is a point which will transform into sub-punctuations, which are still quite simple. Now, of this, reality is made.
Yes, and the observer is the one who can see one time a comma, one time a semicolon, one time a point, but on the quantic level it's just one punctuation symbol.
Yeah, well, I mean, the double slit experiment, for example. You fire a full stop at a screen, and if you are observing it, it goes through as a full stop. If you are not observing it, it goes through as a colon.
This is the experiment of the Schrödinger
point.
The
Schrödinger point.
Yes. If you put punctuation inside a box and everybody knows this. I think it's a cat, but this is because the punctuation has confused their minds. But it's so simple after all.
Yeah. But what do we do about it? There are only two of us. 3 maybe against, but we must not tell too many people this truth, because they will be in danger. So on the one hand, we must spread this news virally to the world, but on the other hand, we must provide prophylaxis against the attack of punctuation.
Have you prophylaxis about punctuation? Could we vaccinate people against punctuation,
Well, we probably could if we scrape off the punctuation marks, just a small number of them, from written texts.
So now when you are removing commas from books, which is your main occupation right now.
Well, it is, yes.
Actually, you are intrinsically preparing the first, you are the pasteur of the anti-punctuation war, because if you put just a little bit of punctuation, a little bit of anything, can actually vaccinate about the real thing. A little bit of viruses, vaccinate against diseases, a little bit of information, this is the news that we see on TV, vaccinates you against the truth, because it gives you the illusion to know what happens, which is not true. And with a little bit of punctuation, you could eventually vaccinate people against the real enemy of...
what we should do, in fact, is we should fill up a hypodermic syringe, a very subtle one, such as dentists use.
Yes,
we should come up behind people and inject a single full stop of ink into their bare skin.
Maybe we should find the crucial neuron and just to put because there must be one neuron,
Well, yeah, but we have to target that through the skin. We cannot just stab people in the head with...
it's not politically incorrect.
It would, I have, in fact, put a single comma into a dish of jelly, And
that's very good.
Then I waited for quite a few days, and I discovered that there were many commas in the...
Was it one of the commas that you took out of books?
It was. Actually, I experiment upon those which I have withdrawn from books. I have to keep them closed in liquid nitrogen.
Don't say to anyone, because you could be persecuted, you know, for mistreating of punctuation, and you know, there must be some society for the protection of punctuation, and
there is in Ireland.
I was sure about
the
that.
Irish Apostrophe Preservation Society. Somebody joined me to it, and I received messages. Yes. Obviously, punctuation realised what I am doing.
They're organizing.
They're organising against me, because an apostrophe is exactly the same as a comma, but in a different position.
Yes.
At the top of the word instead of at the end.
That's
at the
clearly a clearly quantic phenomenon.
Yeah. And the
if you know the position of the punctuation, it changes identity.
now I see the completely evil motives of those people who joined me without asking me on Facebook into the Irish Apostrophe Preservation Society. They claim that they're trying to preserve the correct use of apostrophes, which are misused by people who sell fruit, particularly in England and Ireland, so that they will write apples with an apostrophe between the E and the S, which is completely a wrong usage. But who am I to speak of correct usage? Why should I impose the dictatorship of the punctuationiat, which is like the proletariat, only different?
Yeah. The universe is a very complicated place.
It's a bit more complicated than we can possibly imagine.
You can't even start to talk, and suddenly new mysteries arise.
Well, we are safe in our dreams at the moment, because usually there is not much punctuation in dreams that I have noticed.
Yeah, probably dreams is our last man standing against punctuation.
This might be the most important contribution of the surrealists to the preservation of civilization.
Probably surrealism is actually the secret society which fights against the
dictatorship of punctuation.
Yes, the dictatorship of the banal dictatorship of punctuation, because actually there is a banality in all this dictatorship. This is the tragic, because a dictatorship of the surrealist would be fun, at least.
Well, it would be. Have you looked at a telephone book recently? A telephone directory. Have you seen how many punctuation marks are in a telephone directory, infecting the names of people?
Yeah.
This is why we should always use our full names and not allow them to be reduced to initials.
The reduction of initials, actually. This is also why the Americans especially use so many acronyms.
CIA.
Yeah, for
example, yes.
For example, I mean, the Central Intelligence Agency is just, it contains 3 punctuation with 3 letters. We speak about 50%.
Yeah, 50% of it is punctuation. This would be regarded as infiltration by Soviet or
FBI, the same.
FBI, yes. All of these organizations, possibly in Romania, the Securitate did not have any acronym.
And therefore there was a revolution against Ceausescu.
Yes,
because he didn't use punctuation in his secret services.
Yeah.
He was punctuation free.
Yeah, look at Britain, MI5, MI6.
That's all a triumph of, I mean, they changed the letters, but the punctuation is the same.
Yeah, the Russians, that is
this is
FSB, KGB.
All the same. The 50% of punctuation, which always is the same punctuation.
Yeah, it's always. Now, the only secret services we can trust and collaborate with are ones which have a single name.
The Mossad.
The Mossad, yes. Yeah. The Securitate has already been overthrown.
The Mossad is stronger.
The Mossad is stronger, yes.
Also the German Bundesnachrichtendienst.
Oh,
They created strong, very long words,
Very strong.
which is a punctuation free, and it's very difficult to infiltrate it with punctuation. For this reason, they made it very long. Have you asked me, why should on earth a government make such a long name for something simple as a civilization?
Now we know.
Bundesnachrichtendienst.
Yes,
the punctuation.
now we know the reason. This will be the 1,000-year intelligence agency. Yeah, so our choices really are to work with the Germans or
with Mossad or with both.
With Mossad or with both.
Have to make an alliance of all the punctuation-free entities.
We should send a punctuation-free message to Mossad and the German Secret Service in order to confide this information. They have realized this instinctively.
But they didn't rationalize it, formalize it.
The Japanese kempeitai, however, that is actually 3 different words which have been shortened and collapsed into each other, but without punctuation. They were quite strong. Now, I'm trying to think of other secret services that we can enlist. Reliable, unpunctuated secret services.
Maybe the secret services which are without a name at all, so that can not be infiltrated in no way.
That would be the cleverest way to protect yourself, to have no name.
Yeah.
How many secret services can you think of at the moment?
I'm thinking now, by thinking at secret service, I'm thinking other countries like Albania, they have secret services. These little countries,
what are they called?
I actually once I met somebody of the secret service of Moldova, and a very little country, but actually was using his car of secret service in order just to enter free in some discos. Sometimes I ask myself, some little countries. Do they really have, for example, I don't know, little countries in Africa, Chad, do they have secret services?
Well, they will. Every country,
Samoa, in the Pacific.
Every developing nation needs a secret service for authenticity, even if it is only 3 people who are members of the police force.
Little countries like San Marino, Andorra. These very, very little countries like Liechtenstein, which is just a few houses, Monte Carlo, do they have secret services?
Well, there is a lot for us to investigate before we can make our revelations open to the world.